フライ、インフィニティウォール、マジックウォードホーリー、ライフエッセンス、グレーターフルポテンシャル、フリーダム、フォールスデータライフ、シースルー。
Welcome back everyone. Today we'll be taking a review of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. A game I had not originally planned to cover, but after it devoured 100 hours of my time in 1 week, I feel I have to make a video as the only way to re-establish control over my life. Honestly, I could stop the video there. The fact that I sunk that much time into it is both the biggest recommendation for and advisement against it I could give. So, what is a Pathfinder anyway? In setting, they're somewhat of a cross between the Freemasons and the East India Trading Company. In game, they're just who you speak to for respecing characters. In real life, that's a bit more of a complicated question. If you're the kind of person watching my videos, then I wager you likely already have played in some, or at least have a passing knowledge of, tabletop RPGs. But on the off chance, some background. Back in 1974, there was a man by the name of Ernest Gygax, who, despite having their name indicative of an interstellar warlord, made a little game called Dungeons & Dragons. Also Dave Anderson, but no one remembers him. This was a big hit for a relatively niche hobby at the time, selling over 4,000 units in its first year or so. They would release revisions and additions over the next few years, such as AD&D and a full-on second edition. People really liked it, and it sold well, helped somewhat by the Streisand effect from 1980s Christian moral panics. However, by 1997 they were nearly bankrupt, and ended up being bought out by Wizards of the Coast, known for Magic the Gathering. They created 3rd edition, which centered the game around the now familiar D20 system we know today. People loved it, and it made a ton of money. Then, in 2008, 4th edition was released, and everyone hated it. It nearly killed the franchise. And so, much like the aforementioned Christians, a schism was formed. Except instead of Martin Luther nailing his big list of why Catholicism is cringe on Wittenberg Castle, it was Paizo Publishing putting out a competing TTRPG system based on 3rd edition. Wizards of the Coast would eventually fix their mistakes by putting out D&D 5th edition in 2014, which won back a lot of fans and was all around a huge success, partially thanks to nerd culture starting to become extremely trendy at the time. But by that time, Pathfinder had already had half a decade to establish itself, so the two would now compete alongside each other. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of 5th edition. It simplified things more than I'd like, and its current direction appears somewhere between controversial and confused to outright mismanagement and self-sabotage. I know it's not D&D related, but actually what the fuck are you doing, Wizards? Then again, they have just announced the eradication of the half-elves, so they might be moving in the right direction to win me back. So, is Pathfinder basically just D&D 3.5? Yeah, pretty much. In 2018, Pathfinder Kingmaker would be released, a fully digital campaign utilising the Pathfinder system. It was developed by Owlcat Studios, and once several months had passed for all the bugs to be ironed out from the nearly Bethesda tier launch, it was a pretty good game. In 2021, they would release a second game, Wrath of the Righteous. This had a similarly buggy launch, but playing it in 2023, I'm happy to report that I didn't encounter anything game-breaking. A few minor animation lockups, incorrect icons, and questionable hitboxes. Did have the escape key stop bringing up the menu, which could have been critical as you need that for saving, but luckily there's an icon on the UI for it. When you start a new game, you'll probably notice that the damage is set to only 80% for you and your party. Don't change this. I've played enough TTRPGs to know that most DMs want you, if not necessarily to perish entirely, at least to suffer. In this case, your DM is code written 4 years ago in Cyprus. It does not understand mercy. This adjustment, however, does not affect the single most difficult part of any TTRPG: character creation. This will be who you are for the next 100 or so hours, so best to make sure you're happy with it. Once again, custom portraits are back, as well as my favourite voice pack.
May I see your entrails, please?
Race variety is pretty good. You have your standard dwarves, humans, elves, and half-breeds of the latter. Slightly less common but still fantasy staples of halflings, half-orcs, and half a second to get out of my goddamn sight. Gnomes. On the slightly less common side, you have the Dhampir, Ored, and furries. Finally, there's those whose bloodlines extend into the extraplanar, either from seducing angels or getting Genghis Khan'd by demons, that being the Aasimar and Tieflings respectively. I considered Tiefling, but they're mostly played by the sort of people who wear Be Gay Do Crime t-shirts, so I went with Aasimar, as the wings granted by the angelic bloodline are probably the best representation of myself I could get in this. There is an almost overwhelming choice of classes, 25 at a simple count, but these will usually have at least 6 subclasses each, and you can still just take the base class, meaning the count is over 175 even before you get into prestige or multiclassing. Theoretically, you can take one level in 20 different classes, at which point the possibilities are better described using this than words, but that kind of hot mess probably wouldn't get very far. But no matter if you want to hit people with lumps of steel, high velocity twigs, or the unmatched power of the sun, there's something that has you covered. For spellcasters, these fall under two main archetypes: wizard and sorcerer. The difference is that wizards draw their ability to cast from study and intelligence, whereas sorcerers just kinda wing it. Think of it like musicians. The wizard understands musical theory and knows that the fifth harmonic chord will resonate with the third of the opposing minor scale. Sorcerers, on the other hand, read half the blurb on the back of the textbook, got bored and just started jamming until they gained an intrinsic knowledge of what sounds good. The result is that wizards have to prepare each of their spells ahead of time, while sorcerers can cast any combination of what they know spontaneously up to a daily maximum. This would seem to make sorcerers straight up better, and I'd kind of agree, but wizards do get higher level spells faster, and the ability to steal other people's homework by copying spells from any scrolls you find. I play a Blood Rager, which, following on from our musical analogy, would be the equivalent of blasting the shittiest free EDM bassline you could find, doing a rail of bar salts, and then just smashing rocks together until your neighbour's phone and noise complaint. Once you have your class and race, you still need to pick your background, bloodline, feats, which god you venerate, or none, appearance, alignment. Of note, gods, and some classes for that matter, are alignment specific. So for example, playing Paladin locks you to lawful good, meaning that you can't select to worship Asmodeus. If you don't want to play with these restrictions, there are mods to address this. Once you're done, you get dropped half dead into a city square and healed by the local dragon. Her name isn't worth remembering, as it would take longer to say than she's actually around for.
You don't believe me? Perhaps I should retake my true form and engulf this square with my ice breath to win your trust.
Here you can immediately notice one of the biggest improvements from the first game, that being that you can actually rotate the camera, bringing us up to par with BioWare from 2002. There's also a lot of small improvements on the graphical and UI side, tidying up and streamlining the interface and such like. Incidentally, most of the major improvements over the first game are actually in what they've removed. Namely, no more House of the Edge of Time, no more Darwin's Quest, and no more Lindsay. Genuinely not sure which of those I'm happiest to see gone. Two of those mentioned do get a spiritual successor, but they're a lot better this time. Graphically, the game looks pretty good. With the exception of portraits and some storybook sections, everything is 3D, which looks good from a distance and in motion, but doesn't quite hold up to close scrutiny. The character models are a bit potato-y, especially the non-human races. The upside is that all gear and most items are dynamically modelled onto your character, and you'll not be looking up close at them very often anyway. Animation also tends towards the basic. In combat this is fine, but a lot of out-of-combat encounters still use the same set of stock animations. Get used to seeing this punch used for nearly everything. Alignment system has also been improved. Dialogue options are rarely restricted based on your alignment. In fact, I'm not sure I saw a single one. Instead, you can take any option, and those that shift your alignment will display its evil or lawful tag. The only options locked will be the ones for the Mystic Pass, and these have far greater effects. Back to the present, surprisingly enough, your level 1 PC isn't able to stand up to the main villain, or for that matter, that most subtle and unexpected of killers, uneven paving. Once you wake up, you're at the bottom of a pit, and convenient party member material are standing around ripe for the meat shielding. There's Seela.
I'm Seela, Paladin by the grace of Iomade.
An excellent tank with good healing and support capacity to boost. Anevia.
I'm Anevia Tirabade, of the Eagle Watch.
Who's not actually recruitable. And
Amelia.
Whose singular purpose is to perform trickery checks.
I hope you appreciate this.
These are for disarming traps and picking locks. Once you have a fuller party, you can split the skills that you want trained across each member as appropriate, as, with the exception of a few story segments, when making a check out of combat, the highest skilled companion is used. This does extend to creatures, meaning the best companion for climbing a ladder might well be the horse. Perception is somewhat of an exception to this, as it is rolled for by all characters automatically, so for spotting extra loot in hidden areas it's worth raising this on as many characters as possible if you have the spare skill points. Again, this includes the horse. More importantly, in the cave systems you run into the mongrels who fill you in on the plot. Around 100 years ago, a powerful mage named Arilu Vorlesh performed some magical fluxy-wuxy resulting in a giant seam in the earth that demons pour out of, known as the World Wound. The surrounding kingdoms have been launching crusades to retake this ever since, all of which failed miserably. The mongrels are the descendants of the first crusade, now mutated by exposure to the abyssal plane leaking into Galorian. You get two who join your party. Wenduag, who's part cat, part spider, and the mongrel's best hunter. She respects strength above all and has a penchant for kinky sex. Then you have Lan, who is half lizard, specifically the left half. He is also there, I guess? The Mongols believe it is their destiny to once again rise to the surface to save the Uplanders and complete the crusade their ancestors failed. They're in this cave specifically to find a relic, the sword of an angel who fought the demons all that time ago. You find it, and then proceed to eat it. You'll now start to see what appear to be skill checks when performing dialogue. These will say something like, requires angel mystic path. This is a complete lie. They in fact unlock the relevant mystic paths. It's best to pick as many of these options as possible when you see them, as it won't be for a few more levels till you actually need to pick which path to follow. I'll get more into the mystic paths as they come up, but just know that there's not really a bad choice for them. The levels in them are separate from class levels, meaning you effectively can end the game level 30 rather than just 20. Either way, you progress through the caves till the mongrel village. I'd advise heeding Wendowag's advice unless you want to miss out on some of the mythic paths, and be saddled with land for the next 50 hours. Once that's done, she'll help you get into the shield maze where the cultists are hiding out. I get that the Canabras higher-ups have more to worry about with the demons on their border, but it still amazes me they've managed to miss the entire civilization of mutants living below their city, as well as the Baphomet cult that has made themselves so at home that they've not only built a subterranean base, but tiled, carpeted, and are halfway through installing high-speed broadband in the thing. If you take Wendowag's advice, then she'll help you slip in, and then you can start murder hoboing like the best of them. Now's a good time to talk about combat. If you're familiar with the first game, or CRPGs in general, it's nothing too out there. You can use both turn-based, like it's an actual tabletop game, or switch to real-time with pause if you want things to go faster. Real-time also isn't fully real-time. Each character has a timer equivalent to a turn before they can take action, so you don't end up with the machine gun archers of some other CRPGs. If you want to cast a spell, you select the target, and once it's your turn, the spell will resolve. The exception to this is movement. In real-time, everyone moves at once. This is great for melee fighters, and less good for their backline spellcasters. You can switch at any point, so you absolutely can use real time to close a gap, then switch to turn-based to take actions like normal. Just remember to set your spellcasters to hold position, otherwise they will charge a Balrog with a stick and get mulched rather than just standing at the back casting power word come like they're supposed to. There is a third type as well, which I'll refer to as Sneaky Bastard. While out of combat, you don't have the same turn timers, so simultaneous casting is possible just depending on animation length. This makes buffing for fights a lot less tedious, but if you still find it too monotonous, there is a mod that lets you bind all your casting to a single button. The other upshot is that if enemies have not seen you yet, you can obliterate some of them before the fight even starts. They count as flat-footed for the purpose of armor class too, so if you have 2 archers with double shot, you can stick 4 arrows through his memories of childhood before he even has a chance to reconsider his poor life choices of facing north. For melee and archers, you can mostly just click on the bad man and have your dudes wail on him. For magic, this needs to be selected from your skill bar. Some will activate just from a single click, but most will need a target selected. This can be either a single target, line, or AoE. For lines and AoEs, these will snap to a person or creature, but if you hold down the control key, you can free aim this instead to hit more. Just remember that hitboxes can be weird. If you see the white dashed circle around something, that means it will hit them. What counts as obscuring line of sight also varies. Sometimes solid walls are more of just suggestions, and other times a lamppost will render a cultist simply immaterial. Kinesthetically, the fights are great. The spells cause the screen to shake, and half of it is obscured by particles. The sound effects are also appropriately powerful, and rays can send a ragdoll flying across the room. Gives the proper feeling that you can obliterate someone with mind bullets just for looking at you wrong. Archery is a bit more anemic, at least until you crit. They're not just dead, they're pasted across half the room. There are feats that make this deal damage to all surrounding enemies, which, yeah, a biological nail bomb probably wouldn't be the safest thing to stand around. Combat can become a bit tedious at times with some of the higher AC enemies when it essentially just becomes 6 people repeatedly missing every attack and just fishing for nat 20s. But this only happened a couple of times for me, and there's usually a much better way of dealing with such enemies. Overall, I quite enjoy playing the encounters, but that does come with a caveat. Most TTRPG players can be put on a spectrum between 2 ideals. There are role players and role players. A role player is someone that really enjoys getting into the character they've created, how they interact with the world and its fluff, talking to NPCs, often trying to resolve things through peaceful or unconventional means. A role player, on the other hand, wants to smack things, devising builds that synergize skills together to deal more damage, rolling the dice and seeing the big combat numbers, often care less about the fluff and take a greater interest in the crunch. In the wild, it's easy to spot which one someone is. A role player will be far more likely to have written a 10-page backstory or attend LARPs, whereas a role player probably plays Battletech. These are extremes, of course, but people will often fall towards one side. Personally, I tend towards role player, and as such the game caters to me quite well. If you tend towards role player, there is still plenty here to get stuck into, but you may find the fighting a bit more tedious. Man, if you're only listening to that last section, you're probably very confused right now. There is of course more than just fighting in dungeons. There are often other quests to follow, or puzzles to solve. These usually consist of an extra NPC to talk to, or object to find, or a code to be figured out. And by figured out, I mean tabbing out to a guide to look up the solution. Once you make it to the end of the shield maze, you find a demon trying to feed blood to a set of missing mongrels. You get the option to give into demon rage here, which unlocks the demon mystic path. Again, this doesn't lock you out from any other path, but not doing so will lock you out from certain paths. Once you beat the demons, Lan shows back up and you figure out more of what's going on. Windowag used to work for the demons and would help lure out the mongrels to serve them. However, she switched sides after seeing you as more powerful. The wiki describes her as a cruel, arrogant and bloodthirsty narcissist that never spares any sympathy for those in need, seeing them as weak who don't deserve to live. Lan says he's going to go tell Mumsy on what you did, and you can pick which one to side with. And I know what you're going to say, but hear me out. I can fix her. Or maybe make her worse. I'm not fixed on alignment yet. Lan then runs off. Don't worry, we'll deal with him later. Now you can finally return to the surface.
The battle on the surface rages on, but their strength is flagging. Yet it will all be in vain if no one rises up to turn the tide.
As expected, it's in poor shape. The Great Dragon got disarmed, disheaded, instantly, so your average guardsman with a spear isn't going to be faring much better. You meet up with Irabeth, the captain of the guard and girlfriend of Anevia. She'll lead you to the current base for the city's defenders. This serves as centre of operations and safe place to rest outside of dungeons. Resting in a safe place is also the only way to remove critical wounds. A note on death. When you're reduced below 0 HP, you fall unconscious. If you go to greater negative HP than your constitution score, you get a death's door debuff, and your portrait gets smeared with ketchup. If this happens again before you remove the debuff, the character is killed. Provided you have a decent supply of materials and a high level caster, you can just resurrect the dead there and then. Hell, some higher level spells don't even have a material component. It even buffs allies. Even if you don't have a healer, you can just pay a cleric to do it when you get back to town. This only applies to mortals. Extraplanar abominations such as horses resurrect just from sleeping. Much like in real life, death is really more of an inconvenience. Now you can explore the city more. This is done on a map screen and burns time to travel around. It's still more of a tutorial, but gives you a lot more freedom to check out side quests and pick up more companions. I found my best spellcasters here. You have Ember, an elf child that was burnt at the stake for being a witch. Despite this having left her orphaned and missing a few fingers, she holds no ill will to anyone. A witch is basically a sorcerer that also uses hexes they bought of Etsy. In Ember's case, she's a charisma caster that is friends with the crow who taught her how to shoot lasers. Most of your party will grumble about including a child.
I must have misheard. This girl? Join our party?
With the surprising exception of Wendowag, who instantly recognises that she's actually hiding immense power and thus respects her greatly.
She isn't what she seems, what she would have us believe she is.
I say child, she's an elf, so she's actually well over 100, just hasn't fully matured yet. Her childish innocence and pure heart may be her greatest asset, fully believing that anyone can be redeemed, and asking anyone she comes across to embrace the good in them and change themselves. This includes cultists, Wendowag, and literal demons. Half the time it even works too, and if not, then, well, she's not above atomizing them. There's also Nenio, a mad scientist wizard researching an encyclopedia, who also has the ability to selectively forget any information she deems not important, such as your name or her persona. She also practices less of what I would call moral relativism and more moral total absence, as she will simply do whatever provides interesting experiments. Ethics review? Never heard of it. Shady doctor offering demon organ transplants? Sign me the hell up. The two of them provide the perfect two-pronged assault for pissing off every major demon you encounter, as Ember will immediately try and reconcile their tainted soul, and Nenio will pester them with hyper-specific questions about extraplanar transportation magic. Use this as a convenient distraction for Wendowag to put an arrow between their eyes. Make sure to examine the knife in the market square to pick up the Aeonistic path, and have the church sing-along for the Azata. Once you're ready, you can march on the Grey Garrison. If you did enough side quests, you can bring a full beat squad along. They help fight and even put some enemies to sleep. There's a convenient skill to combo off that.
Surprise!
Here you meet Milagro, a Lilitu whose manipulation of a dwarf caused the fall of Dresden. Speaking of, he's here too, and portrays you just like he did back in Dresden. Despite their reputation as the great destroyers of cities, they kinda just become Team Rocket.
That's right!
Failing at everything in front of you and then blasting off again. This is also where you finally unlock your first step on your Mystic path. Mystic levels are not acquired through XP and are instead gained at specific points in the story. Most of these will each require their own quest lines to achieve, and some may not actually be available until much later. Just remember that picking a new one will replace the benefits of any previous ones you have. Then you can head to the pub to celebrate. Hell, you did such a good job, the Queen herself crowns you Knight Commander of the 5th Crusade. Hopefully you'll do a better job than all the others. You're now free to explore the world and chase tail as you see fit. You get a camp full of soldiers as your base camp, and a couple of advisors. One, an annoying halfling and Lindsay function named Nura, as well as a cleric and follower of the goddess of beauty. He's one of the romance options if you play as a male character. Speaking of, the romance options are much improved over the first game. Kingmaker at base had a total of 4, and only 2 of those were available to both sexes, meaning you really only had 3. Those 2 were also in an open relationship, so it was only a matter of time before you had to deal with the drama from that falling apart. There were a couple extra in DLC, but for the base game the options really weren't that great. This kind of went for most of the characters as well. I could only remember 4 out of the 6 in my Kingmaker party from memory, and the names of less than half of that. This time your options are a lot better. To start with, there's 7, with 3 being gender specific, meaning 5 for females and 6 for males. The best options are available to both though. Looking up a guide is still recommended, as there can be a few steps that aren't particularly obvious, like camping in a very specific location or not being too gentle in the bedroom. As well as adventuring, you also now have to take care of managing the crusade. This is done by playing Heroes of Might and Magic. Yes, this is a major mechanic being introduced tens of hours into the game. It's a CRPG, what do you expect? I've not played any Heroes games, and all my Polish friends are currently busy, so I can't say how it stacks up to the originals, but your units do get blocked by small molehills or pebbles, and the best way to go about combat is a preemptive thermobaric strike, which I've been told is how Might and Magic 5 worked. You get units each week from your home base, but these suck ass and will die in droves. To help this, you can appoint a general. These buff units within have special abilities of their own and can recover a set amount of units after a fight. These come in 2 types, Wizard and Not Wizard. I've only ever taken Wizard. I didn't need to take anything but Wizard. Not when I can delete 2/3 of the enemy force with a single fireball before the first turn has even taken place. Generals also level up, giving them extra abilities and buffs, greater infirmary size, and a greater stack limit for your army. As far as I can tell, there is not a limit for the number within a stack, just the amount of different stacks, so better to recruit the best you can afford. Peasants with sharpened sticks will die in their hundreds to a single demon, but if you agree to help rescue the Hell Knights, you can recruit them as mercenaries each week. They're more expensive than regular units, but they can actually take a hit, and dish one out too. Their leader will also join as your companion. He's kind of a prick though.
But the wounded...
He doesn't actually have the strength to wear his own armour, and is, by God, a gnome. He's lawful neutral, so a right stickler for doing things by the book, and talks a lot of shit for someone who's punting hate. With your army, you now have to clear out various demon armies and forts to progress the story. Your main party can sneak around the armies, but they're still blocked by the forts. Your actual armies aren't quite as low profile, so we'll have to carve a path to reach the forts. The game lets you create multiple armies, each with their own units, generals, and movement points, but I found making a single death stack worked a lot better. If that all sounds like a ball ache, you can just set it to automatic. This will give you a number of days before each fort falls, but also lock you out of the secret ending. I will not be going over the secret ending, as the guide of how to achieve it alone could be someone's university thesis. I also prefer to go through games fairly blind, and there was no chance I was meeting the required conditions on a first playthrough. I might go back and do it at some point, but I don't have another 100 hours to spare right now. Going to get more into spoilers here, but this will be a bit different from my usual warning. I will only be going through my playthrough. There's plenty of characters I didn't meet, places and quests I didn't explore, and the aforementioned secret ending. It's also an RPG, so a lot will depend on the choices you make, and doubly so for your Mystic Path. Playing as the sentient swarm of flesh-eating wasps is probably going to be a bit different from the Righteous Angel playthrough. But nonetheless, spoilers for Windowag's romance, as well as Ember and the normal ending. Skip to here for the conclusion. Okay. The reason Canabras was able to exist so close to the World Wound was because of a set of magical rocks known as the Wardstones. When Locus McScythe attacked, he ripped this up and hurled it into the Grey Garrison. The reason he was able to do this is that demons had secretly been weakening this for years. A turncoat demon had let the priests of Descent know, and they had tried to fix it but was stopped by the local guard. In the Grey Garrison, 2 further things can be learned. Firstly, that the Wardstones worked by having hundreds of angels' souls imprisoned in them, using their holy power to repel the demons. Second, that the demons had worked out a way to turn these into WMDs. How you disarm the demon dirty bomb depends on your Mystic Path, and you'll be granted your first level in Mystic Power. You can then mow your way through the demons with ease, although the traitor dwarf simp prevents you from finishing off the Lilitu. Once appointed head of the 5th Crusade, the commander set out for Dresden, a fort deep in demon territory that was once the prized position of the Crusaders. The road was not long, but it was an arduous one. By the halfway point, scouts started to stop returning back. More of them were sent after, and they were eventually found, at least what was left of them, bones picked clean and bleaching in the sun. From a canyon below, a faint buzzing could be heard, slowly picking up in volume like 1,000 tiny wings beating. The cacophony quickly getting louder, the sky darkening as clouds drew in. The roar now coming from all around as the scouts realised too late that it was no cloud in the sky. The sun was being blocked out by the swarm, and the swarm was hungry. The few scouts that made it back relayed the rough position of the Vescovor's nest. Volunteers were then selected to distract the swarm to allow the commander to run a surgical strike at the nest. Irabeth would lead the distraction effort, hugging her wife and promising that she'd return. Atop the ridge, the thudding of steel against shield quickly got its attention, while down in the valley the commander made haste. Every moment dallied meant more soldiers devoured by the flesh-eating insects. Before long she stood before the Vescivore Queen. It didn't even put up much of a fight. With the hive mind destroyed, the Vescivores fell into disarray, allowing the distractional division to become full-on pest control. The commander kept a sample of the Queen. Who knows when it could come in handy? A few days later, the commander camped out with her companions in the hills. While most slept peacefully, Wendowag approached the commander, complaining of being cold. A rare admission of weakness from the usually proud mongrel warrior. Or perhaps the little cat wanted to play. An hour or so of time, and one divine miracle of somehow not waking the rest of the party later, the two sat in post-coital bliss. In her exposed state, the commander could fully examine Wendowag's body, and a network of scars running across it that rivaled the world wound itself. But the warrior wore them proudly. The long gash on her arm, from where a were-rat bit down and would not let go until she'd smashed its nuts with a rock. The scratches along her arms from scrapping, and the lash marks across her back from, well, something else. With war all around, moments of comfort can be rare. Neither the commander nor her fighter were unexperienced with the matter. Maybe it was just a one-off to relax, but maybe somewhere in the mongrel's cold heart there was a spark of warmth. Days more trudged by as the army and the commander reached closer to Dresden, and before long its great walls could be seen upon the horizon. The commander spent long hours toiling to the night, organising the Crusaders' plans. The candles burnt low when Anivia burst into the commander's tent, a look of horror upon her face. The camp was under assault from the skies. The commander grabbed her weapons and headed out with Wendowag, the mongrel never far from her mistress. Around them, the camp burned. Gargoyles dived from the dark night, carrying off any crusaders they could get their claws into. Quickly, the commander made her way through the camp, regrouping with any companions not already carried off, and slaying any fiends that crossed their path. Camilla and Sela were close by, but as they fought their way forward, they were just not quite in time to stop Irabeth being carried off. Nura was suspiciously fine, and given the amount of alchemist fire she'd been chucking around, might have burnt more of the camp than the gargoyles. The commander considered for a moment that maybe she should have sent her on the Vescivore's distraction party. Once the initial attack had been repelled, the commander could take stock. Ember and Nenio were nowhere to be found. Regil was also missing, but the commander reckoned he could handle himself fine. Anivia was in a panic. Her wife, who had returned safely from fighting a horde of Vescivores without a scratch, was now gone. The commander put her fears at ease as best she could. They would mount a rescue immediately. Nura conveniently knew where they had been taken. The Lost Chapel was atop a small hill. At its base, Nenio stood waiting, excited to tell the commander about all the new weaknesses of their foe she'd discovered before escaping its grasp, presumably by talking it to death. A little further up the trail, Ember crouched in the snow, giving aid to all those she could after having escaped her own kidnapper, presumably from asking it nicely. The commander fought up the hill, passing Regil and the Hell Knights to reach the chapel itself. Within its deconsecrated walls, the ghouls were trying to turn the captured soldiers. Paladins with their divine protection were able to ward off the infection. However, once the ghouls found this out, a much worse fate was laid out for them. This time the party arrived just in time, able to rescue Irabeth, though the paladin's once ironclad resolve had been buckled. In the courtyard behind, a great demon sat playing with the newly converted ghouls like tin soldiers.
Well, how do you like my soldiers?
Playing soldiers? How old are you? 8?
Milagro and Stanton watched from above. As the commander approached, the demon chided and goaded them, relishing new prey.
If you're equal to anything, it's my breakfast!
But failed to account for the mythic power surging through the commander, and was quickly put in his place. Team Rocket then blast off again. With the way cleared, all that remained was to launch a direct attack on Dresden itself. The main goal was to retrieve the Sword of Valor. Sadly, it was just some tart's banner and not an actual sword. However, it did prevent demons from teleporting. If we can reach it, the battle should turn in our favour. A plan needs to be made. There's a few ways to go in. Nura suspects there is a secret passage in the dungeon, but I don't trust the opinion of anyone below 5'5" at this point. Regil will take a side route to take out the artillery, while the commander storms the front gate with Irabeth to inspire the troops. From there, carving a path up the side where the defences are weaker, allowing sappers to come in and break down the gates. There is one way, however, to increase the Crusaders' chance. By deploying the bioweapon gathered from the Vescivore Queen, the swarm can be called down to devour the demons, thus weakening their ranks. All it would take is a couple of volunteers. The plan went off without a hitch, save for the one hitch of the giant demon in the main square, but he was quickly felled by the timely arrival of the dwarven assassin. Inside the dungeon, the demons had imprisoned one of their own, a succubus named Arushale, imprisoned as she was the one that had been telling the priests of Desna about the sabotage of the wardstones. Deep within the citadel there stood another prisoner, Yariel, somehow alive since the First Crusade. Yeah, cool, where's the sword? Cool, bye. With the power of the sword in hand, the demons could no longer teleport away, but that wouldn't stop them from trying their best to take out any crusader in arm's reach. The commander cuts them down in short order, carving a path to the top of the citadel. There she found Stranton, Milagro, and even Nura waiting, panicked and scared, no longer able to flee like before.
Sweetie, let's go! Why are you so slow? They're almost here!
I'm not going anywhere.
Don't you feel it? She's got that damn rag with her! I can't teleport! She's going to kill us.
You got that right.
You stubborn ass! You want to die for a heap of rocks? Go ahead. I'm not staying here. Take your filthy rag. Take your befouled ruins. You can make soup out of this moron for all I care. I've had enough war.
Hey, there's an entire army out there. Any of you gonna stop her? No? Okay. But a certain traitorous halfling is still about. In actuality, she'd been working for the demons all along.
That's what happens to cowards! Get it together, you maggots, and we'll destroy them!
Burning down the camp, luring the Vescivores, all was her doing. She talks a big game, putting on a brave face and trying to make out that she has no issue with dying. But the terror at her rapidly approaching mortality is obvious. And I've been waiting 2 games for this opportunity. Nothing will take the fun out of killing you. Apparently she's also a skinwalker. With the citadel taken, the Sword of Valor can be raised once more above the city. But in doing so, the relic reacted to the commander's mythic power. No longer a banner of Iomade, but of the commander herself. The commander also shit out her dragon. Her name is Avu, the Havoc Dragon. She can't do much right now other than sit around being cute, but she does fill in the lore. The length of a dragon's name is proportional to their age, so when you later run across a dragon named, yeah, I'm not even going to try that, you now have greater context. She also allows the commander's party to reach a size of 9 out of 6. With the capture and repopulating of Dresden, you now have a permanent base of operations to conduct the crusade from. This brings back a lot of kingdom management mechanics from Kingmaker. Various NPCs will come visit you in the throne room, and crusade-wide projects can be researched. You'll also get to make the decisions on which paths to pursue and what to build in Dresden. However, this time it pretty much just affects the units you receive for the might and magic battles. The effect of the choice is shown up front, so it can be worth ignoring your companion's advice to get the units you want. No dice rolls either this time. Extra options are just available if you have the corresponding mystic path or companion. Dresden also has a wide array of merchants to offload all the vendor trash you've been piling up. Now that you're no longer homeless, you can settle in, grab some drinks, and get to know your crusaders better. If you pass a high enough diplomacy check, Anivia will reveal that she was born male, and Irabeth ended up selling her sword for the relevant potion. Honestly, I'm surprised this isn't more common in the setting. The going rate for a non-magical, even masterwork sword isn't exactly high. Also, turning someone into a dog is a 5th level spell, and that's a far greater departure of biology. I know I'd certainly try seeing how the other half lives for what amounts to the price of 3 onions and a wedge of cheese. Back to our story. Once the victory celebrations are finished, the commander takes stock.
There are some matters that require your attention. I am ready to report if you have a moment.
In addition to a horde of strange new demons with unknown powers, remnants of the Vescivores still linger, and there was also that dragon that had been eating the scouts. But first, with her increase in mystic power, several magical creatures had started to gather within the city, wishing for an audience with, and to swear allegiance to, the commander. They were a ragtag lot, including priests of Desna, cavalry sculptors, and a strange man with the suspicious name of Early Sunset. In her dreams, the commander had also seen a location, and a kind voice asking for her help. Upon arriving, the commander was greeted by the demon turncoat she'd freed from the prisons of Dresden. She carried a symbol of Desna, the god of dreams. Cautiously, the party asked her to swear upon it, and without a second thought she did. So, satisfied, the commander agreed to help her. The succubus helped the commander fight her way through to retrieve a relic of old, the Bell of Mercy, whose very rigging drives demons scurrying back to their holes. But this did not even seem to make the succubus flinch. Once the fighting was done, she walked to the commander, speaking to her with none of the pomp and disdain of most demons. She revealed her name as Arushale, and the story of her making. For she was once no different to any other succubus of the Abyss, travelling to the material plane to seduce and feast upon mortals. However, her last meal would leave her shaken, for her prey was no less than a high priest of Desna. When a succubus feeds off a mortal, they absorb them into themselves, and as the priest lay dying, her unconscious mind reached out dreaming of her goddess. Arushale, while subsuming this, was carried with her final thoughts, right to Desna herself. A deity of that magnitude could have rendered her asunder without a second thought for defiling her priests in such a way, but when Desna looked upon the demon, her eyes were that of pity rather than righteous anger. She asked why she had done this. The words resonated within the succubus's soul. The demon ideals came crashing down around Arushale like a shattered pane of glass, and the succubus awoke with a start, the priest still limp in her arms. Something had changed within her, casting aside what she was before. Her life would now be devoted to Desna, to righting the wrongs from her life up until this point. Even if that was a debt she could never repay, she could, nonetheless, make a difference in the lives of everyone from now on. As she finished recounting this to the commander, she gestured to a grave, that of the very priestess of her story, who she had buried and sworn upon. The commander didn't need to hear more, and welcomed her with open arms. Behind her, a sparkle could be glimpsed in the corner of Ember's black eyes. That which she'd always hoped for was just proved true in front of her. The redemption of that which was once nothing but evil. For if one demon can turn good, then, in time, maybe all can. All it took was for them to make the choice to do so. Of note, Arushale also has a ridiculous stat line with a point buy equivalent of over 65, and is also pre-trained in trickery, so Camilla's sole purpose in the party has now been supplanted. When back in Dresden, a new fire burned in Ember. Not the harsh flames that had scorched her body, but a gentle one of hope, talking to anyone that wished to listen, and praying directly to the demon lords themselves, her singular, tiny voice calling out to them to find the good inside themselves. If they could even hear her, she did not know. But it would not stop her from trying, from hoping, from believing in the good in all of them. Wendoag also wished to speak with the commander. She had long promised the commander an invincible army of mongrels, and the time had come to make good on her promise. The commander agreed to accompany her back to Canabris. She seemed almost anxious about something. Making their way back to the shield maze, she barely spoke, finally breaking the silence to speak to their tribe's leader. In her absence, Lan had returned, taking the demon-strengthened mongrels with him to somewhere hidden in the labyrinthine caves. Wendoag knew instantly, her smile snaking back across her face. She knew where he'd be. It was a place they both knew well, where they'd used to sneak off to, where she'd made him a man all those many moons ago. True to her instincts, Lan sat in the cave, doing his best to remove the demon's work from the mongrels. He immediately rose to block Wendoag, anger visible in the otherwise zen monk, demanding that Wendoag fight him, one-on-one, a simple rite of combat to prove who was true. The fight was not long. Whether Lan was overconfident that he could beat the one who trained him, or that he already knew he stood no chance with a bow made in a cave against the best the Fifth Crusade could afford, would be lost to time, sinking into the cave like the red stream that ran from his once more unmoving body. Wendoag returned to the former chief of her tribe. It was clear she had now surpassed him. This was her tribe now. And, as had been destined for those long decades in darkness, she would now lead them to the surface, against the demons who were their creation. They emerged from the caves, stepping out for Dresden. Wendoag marched at the head with her mistress, never once looking back. Upon their return, Dresden was in uproar. Many lay dead in the square, and Ember was missing, taken by a huge force of Baphomet cultists that had snuck disguised into the city. Those listening to her sermons had fought valiantly to protect her, but sadly there were just too many. And in the time for the guard to arrive, they had disappeared into the hills. The commander set out immediately, following the tracks of the cultists, Arushale lending an invaluable hand, her expertise in espionage familiar with how they had hidden their retreat, her face showing genuine concern for the elf girl she'd met no longer than a fortnight earlier. Before long, the party caught up with the cultists at a shrine to Baphomet. Hope filled the party as they heard the elf's voice coming from up the trail. The party listened closely as they quietly but swiftly approached. Ember's prayers to Baphomet had in fact been heard, over and over, enough for the demon lord to send spies after the irritating mortal. However, after the fifth set of these did not return from their recon missions, a strike group was gathered. The mission went awry upon reaching Dresden. All the spies they had sent had not been killed like they'd expected, but instead stood around the witch, enthralled at her words, already having turned their back on Baphomet. Mere speeches from the girl were losing them manpower. In that moment, the strike force knew that she could not be allowed to remain. They had to act now and bring the girl back to be sacrificed to their Dark Lord. The party rounded the corner to where Ember lay on the sacrificial altar. They could hear the cultists already infighting with the demons around them, for their hearts had already been swayed by her words in the short time taken to reach their base. The demons were less on board, and in a moment descended upon the troublesome elf. The cultists moved to protect her, a futile effort against the greater demons, had it not been for the commander's arrival quickly dispatching them. After the dust settled, they stood around. Some begged for mercy, some resigned themselves ready for their execution, and some just asked to hear one last time from Ember. The commander pondered, before her train of thought was broken by Ember, standing a little shaky but confident nonetheless between her and them, begging the commander to spare them, that they didn't know what they were doing, and that what they did proved that they could change for the better. The commander thought for a moment, taking in all that had happened. There was truth in the girl's words, but she could not let them walk free. She would bring them back to Dresden, where they would be thrown into the prison, but not executed. Ember would also have free access to it. She could provide her sermons wherever she saw fit. If that was to those held in the dungeon, then they should count themselves blessed the walking saint of redemption saw the best in them. If not out on crusade with the commander, or the small amount of time she allowed herself to sleep, that is where Ember would be found, beseeching any who'd listen to find the good in themselves. Days passed, dragons slain, and more creatures flocked to the commander's free crusaders, that now welcomed the likes of treants and mimics into their ranks. Together with a conventional army, they began pushing the demons further and further back. Upon an expedition into yet more missing scouts, the commander journeyed to a strange village. Demons seemed to walk around openly, the townsfolk seeming none the wiser. No, beyond that, the commander appeared a monster to them. Searching deeper into the village, all the stones meant to ward off the demons had quietly been destroyed and replaced with fakes. Finally, after spooking the village chief, the commander let him run, leading the party directly to the cause of all this madness, a demon named Jerebeth. It mocked the commander, telling her that if she dispels the illusion, the villagers will realise that they've been harbouring demons, and the supposed demons they've driven from the village and killed have in fact been their kin. The commander didn't even consider it, having seen firsthand that human hearts are not so weak as demons would like to think. The truth would not be easy, but it would be better than bringing further harm under illusion. Sadly, the demon ran before it could be finished off, but it left something important behind, the keys to its home. The commander returned to Dresden to prepare for the assault on the Ivory Sanctum. Suddenly, Erebeth ran in with an urgent update for the commander. A drunken brawl had broken out in the tavern, and in the resulting fight, Wendowag had killed 2 people. The commander dropped everything she was doing and headed straight for the tavern with Erebeth. Wendowag stood, shouting, seemingly drunk over the 2 corpses. Seemingly no one of note, but they would have still mattered to someone. Wendowag boasts and chides, but almost appears to be hiding something. Something more than just a brawl that got out of hand. The commander nodded to Erebeth. She'd handle Wendowag personally. Within the commander's chambers, Wendowag stood before her mistress, all impressions of alcoholic impairment seeming to have already evaporated. The cat coyly inquired as to her punishment. The commander didn't answer her question, instead telling the mongrel to kneel before her, and again with force when not heeded. Next would come discipline, of a kind. Once finished, Wendowag examined the bruises and marks left on her by the commander. She smiled up at her, enjoying the sight of them as a reminder of the passions that had just passed. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but the commander spoke first, asking what the real reason behind the killing was. As feral as Wendowag liked to portray herself, she knew better than to kill without reason, and had the grace to know the limits of what would do a human in. There had to be something more to it. Wendowag relented, and opened up properly to the commander for the first time. It had not just been any old brawl. They had come seeking a fight, taunting, jeering, asserting that the commander was weak and just bringing in any wild beast. Not only insulting her kin, but going further as to call the commander a heretic for such actions, implying she was merely just an attempted usurper of the Queen's power. Their words were more than just provocative. They bordered on treasonous. In sentencing them to death, Wendowag was almost in line with the laws of governance. Yet, the commander still would have been in her right to have sentenced the mongrel to death in the tavern. Wendowag had taken a big risk, one that relied on trusting another completely, and an uplander at that. Something, even if only small, had started to change within her. The next day, the commander and crew set out for the Ivory Sanctum, arriving by the end of the week, and with key in hand, granted entry. Within its walls, 2 sets of demons were calling the place home, although they did not appear to be happy about either other one being there. Jerebeth chose that moment to make her presence known again. Despite the commander having promised to kill it last they had spoke, it offered a deal. Rid the other demons from its home, and its followers would assist with the spring cleaning. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, the commander accepted. Regardless, if the commander had anything to say about it, Jerebeth still would not leave the place alive. They made swift progress, slicing their way into the belly of the sanctum. As they crossed a bridge in the caves deep beneath, demons poured from either side, trapping the party. The commander gripped her glaive tightly. Arushale and Wendowak notched arrows. Ember and Nanio began to mutter the starts of spells. Then, in a flash of holy light, the hand of the Inheritor, second of Iomedae herself, descended upon the bridge.
In the name of Iomedae, I say to you fiends, flee, for you will find no mercy here. Forge onward to your enemy, champion, and have no fear. The warriors of heaven will keep the monsters from your back.
The commander smiled to herself. Allies seemed to be thick and fast today, and who was she to complain? Thanking the angel, they ploughed on. After cutting through their half of the demon horde, the demon's master stood before her. An evil creature, nay swarm of creatures in the shape of a man. A swarm that walked. Spells and swords seemed to pass straight through his barely corporeal form. But nonetheless, in time, he fell like any other. The notes he left behind gave important information to the source of the strange demon's power, the Nihindrian crystals, and where they were coming from. Dresden, or rather portals deep beneath. The commander and cohort knew what must be done, and they sped for home, only stopping for the inevitable betrayal from Jerabeth now that her maze had been cleared out. It was no skin off the commander's back, saving her the trouble of double-crossing the demon herself. Back in Dresden, the commander convened with the Hand of the Inheritor. Now knowing the location of the Nihindrian crystals, he urged the commander to summon the queen and use her armies to storm the place, descending into the bowels of Dresden and clearing them out room by room. But the commander had a better idea. She did not need some queen's help. She had her own army and the Free Crusaders. Meanwhile, the queen's forces would take weeks to arrive. The Free Crusaders were ready to go now. Fuck the queen. Rest what you can. Tonight it is our turn to run rampant in the demon's home. At dusk, the seal of the catacombs was broken and the commander's forces descended upon them. She was flanked on the right by mimics and treants, divine angels and paladins on the other, and within her hands wielded the Soul Shear, a powerful relic that used the death it inflicted to summon demons under the commander's yoke. Against the army of Four Plains, the unprepared defenders never stood a chance. Even their strongest fell before the commander and her allies that day. Cowering at the back, they found Milagro, somehow still alive. How many defeats was this now? You could see it plastered across her eyeless face, now stained with the brand from her lord as punishment for repeated failures. The commander considered smiting the demon upon the spot, but at this point she just wasn't a threat anymore. So for a final time, the Lilitu fled into the night. But no good deed goes unpunished. Queen Galfrey herself rushed into the room, having used teleportation magic of her court to reach the action as quickly as possible. She gave little more than a curt acknowledgement of the commander's victory, before attacking her verbally.
It would seem I missed out on all the fun. Or perhaps I should say, my loyal commander decided to launch a reckless attack without waiting for reinforcements or guidance from me.
Finding any and all defects to pick at.
I cannot but notice your strange choice of companions. A murderous succubus, and to take the demon with you to the front lines, where one well-timed stab in the back could put a tragic end to our entire Crusader cause. It is unthinkably reckless.
Without even stopping to consider her actions, Seela stepped out of line in front. The lawful good paladin who had dedicated her life to defeating demons, stood, speaking out against her own queen to defend a succubus.
With all due respect, my lady, Arushale has proven herself to be a faithful and reliable comrade.
She had followed the path of defending the good and the innocent her whole life, and while she could have never imagined the day that would entail taking the side of a demon, in the moment not a single shred of doubt clouded her mind for what she knew was right.
She has fought bravely for us, and we both want to see the demons defeated. Is there any reason to reproach the commander for accepting her into our party?
Thank you. I can't believe you really said that.
An almost imperceptible snarl flashed across the queen's face before she regained her composure and continued her attack, pivoting to anything else she could think of, shaming the commander for attacking the demons without her support, for the use of Vescaphors, for defiling Iomedae's banner. The final accusation being rebutted by no less than Iomedae's herald himself.
My righteous sister, you are entitled to make such a decision, but please reconsider whether this is the right one.
Even the words of her god's angel were not enough to change the old woman's heart. No argument she presented was anything other than excuse. Her mind had already been made. Avarice at this upstart commander burned her to her core. She stripped the now ex-commander of all rank,
I am forced to remove you from the command of the Fifth Crusade.
announcing that she, Queen Galfrey, would now lead the crusade herself. She ordered the ex-commander and her party to walk through the portal into the demon's world, to sort it out from their side. An obvious suicide mission. But who was this now rankless girl to stand up against the decree of a queen? Windowag looked over, as if asking the same question that was coursing through the mind of her mistress. The queen had come alone, ahead of her army. The party, the Free Crusaders, they answered not to the queen, but the commander. The jealous old hag didn't realise just how vulnerable she was right now. She gripped Soulshear tightly till her knuckles turned white. The crusade came first. She turned to face the rift, and within its swirling depths shimmered the reflection of herself, of all she had strived for, all she had achieved. The hard-fought battles and enduring hardships, the new friends and lovers, flashing like half-remembered fragments of a dream, even now slipping away into its inky darkness. With her companions gathered around, she took one last look back before stepping into her exile. This was not over.